Welcome back for a new top 10 list. As always, this is Goku-san DBZ. This time, talk a brief bit about, in my opinion, 10 criminally underrated game consoles. Handhelds with game consoles total, be looking at 3 specific handhelds and 7 consoles. Now, some of these I do not own, but these are ones I actually have gotten the opportunity to try, whether it be at a retro game convention or otherwise. So, with that said, first I want to say, in my opinion, 10 underrated consoles. Coming in at number 10 was a console originally released in I believe it was mid 1980s. It was a console with its own built in screen and everything, and you can plug up to 2 controllers in it. Arguably, it is, in my opinion, a console more people need to check out. If you get the chance or see one, try it. It is called the Vectrex. And, like said, it is a console that deserves a lot more credit than it gets. Graphically, it was ahead of its time. By today's standards, it still looks very primitive, but for the 80s when it came out. The Vectrex was definitely ahead of its time for its, I believe it was called Vector Graphics. It was very different. It was definitely like simulation, like sort of, I'd say, early style digitized graphics, really before 3D was really a thing. So it was really ahead of its time technologically. Now, sadly, a lot of these underrated, in my opinion, consoles are things that were ahead of their time. Coming at number 9 is a handheld that is arguably, I think, unfortunately overlooked, and it was only sold though in Japan. It had a very short life, unfortunately. Had about around a 2-year lifespan total. Now it sold around 2 million units in Japan itself, in its home country. It was a handheld developed by Namco Bandai, or at that time just Namco, or rather just Bandai, and Elements Namco was involved. But the actual creator of the handheld, of course, I'm talking about the handheld known as the Bandai Wonder Swan. Um, though you would total end up having 2 more revisions, total 3 versions. You had the traditional Wonder Swan, you had the Wonder Swan Color, and then you had the Wonder Swan Crystal. Now, the Crystal model actually had a built in backlight. So, but the first 2 models, like Game Boy and everything, did not have any backlight, so you had to play it with like a very bright light in order to really see the screen. Now, when it comes down to it, it is unfortunate more people don't know of the Wonder Swan. Coming in next at number 8, for me, in my opinion of things of underrated consoles, um, I have to say at number 8 is arguably probably the most underrated of the 8-bit era. Coming in at number 8, at least in my personal opinion, is the Sega Master System. The Master System really was technologically, yeah, it was pretty much on par with the original NES, but with that said, it definitely targeted a different style demographic than the NES. Tried to go for a more broad audience, where with the Master System, it focused a little bit more on like Unreal shooters specifically, is where it succeeded, though it also, in my opinion, had a solid overall port of the original Double Dragons game, one of the best classic beat 'em ups. Coming in at number 7 now, we're gonna go back over at number 7 to another console, in my opinion, that deserves a lot more love than it gets. At 7, in my opinion, is the Panasonic 3DO. Comes in number 7. I can actually say I actually have the 3DO, given today it's a relatively affordable console to collect for now compared to when it originally released in the early 90s. I believe it was around 92, 93 time frame. But funny enough, with its library, about 60% of its entire library was developed and made by, at that time, not so despised Electronic Arts, or EA for short. But that's because really one of the original creators of the company Electronic Arts was involved in the development and creation of the Panasonic 3DO. It is a console that I think is actually worth collecting. It has some really good games, like a couple of, I think, great on-rail shooters. There is, of course, some sports games. There's only a couple of fighting games. Sadly, the fighting games are not a huge thing on this console. This console specifically targets more of shooters slash jet fighting or whatever. Fans, if you like Air Force style combat games and stuff, it's great. It has a couple of, I think, actually decent horror games. Also has some interesting, I think, solid ports, like the port of the classic Dragon's Lair, which I think is a game that more people need to check out. But overall, yeah, in my opinion. Coming at number 6, in my view, is a definitely a more recent era underrated console in my opinion. At number 6, I have to give it to probably pretty much the newest console, more or less. One more, yeah. Number 6 goes to the Nintendo Wii U. Wii U is incredibly underrated, and it's sad. It's a great console to collect for. A lot of the games are very reasonably priced because most people don't want the Wii U. It is a console that, frankly, I think deserves a lot more love than it gets, and I do recommend to anyone, if you are a Nintendo fan or a platformer fan, this is definitely a console to collect for. And like I said, you can get many games on the Wii U for easily under $20, no problem. You'd be surprised how many games there are definitely specific games that are going for a lot, like the HD port of Twilight Princess and a few others. But still, it's only a smaller percentage overall. It's still very affordable, great console. And if you don't have a Wii U, do yourself a favor. If you have the opportunity, pick up a Wii U, pick up some great platformers, because that's where it excels in. Though it has some really good fighting games also, in my opinion. The, in my view, Wii U version of Tekken Tag Tournament 2 is the definitive version because of all the extra content and things you get, plus a cool extra mode that is not available on anything else. Coming in at number 5 is we're gonna go back to Sega quickly for the number 5 slot, and that is, of course, the, even though I have it only at number 5 of underrated, is still my favorite console of all time. And number 5, in my opinion, is the Sega Dreamcast. A console that deserves so much more love than it actually got, but I'll give it, at least Capcom showed a lot of love to this specific game console. So thank you, Capcom. Thank you for actually showing a lot of passion to the Dreamcast, which gave us many great games like Cannon Spike, Project Justice, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, as well as stuff like, of course, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, Capcom vs. SNK, as well as Japanese version, of course, Capcom vs. SNK 2, as well as Street Fighter 3, Double Impact, Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, and so on. And of course on-rail shooters from Capcom like Giga Wing 1 and 2, Power Stone 1 and 2. Nevertheless, it is a console that's definitely becoming more and more expensive to collect for in recent years. Coming in at number 4 is definitely, in my opinion, one of the greatest handhelds, arguably, of all time. If you are a classic 2D fighting fan, this is definitely a dream to collect for. Coming at number 4, in my opinion, is the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which is arguably one of the greatest handhelds easily of all time. From the time period it came out in the late 90s, it is far superior to pretty much anything else of the time. And sadly, it would not have a Beyond Blacklight, and that's one of the things that hurt it. Plus, it didn't get really a massive overall Western release, unfortunately, but mostly just hardcore SNK fans would pick it up. The because the Pocket Color would end up only selling about 3 million units, which is still better than many other forgone handhelds. At least, and the Neo Geo Pocket Color is still regarded very highly to this day, specifically because it is easily the best handheld for 2D fighting games of all time. If you're an SNK fighting fan of Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, whatever, it's an incredible handheld to play, even though it only has two, of course, buttons, but the joystick controller is superb, and I love the click sound that it makes, but honestly, the Neo Geo Pocket Color deserves a lot more love than it gets. Coming in at number 3, we're gonna go back to another Sega console. At number 3, in my opinion, of criminally underrated stuff, I have to give third place to the Sega Saturn, easily the best 2D fighting game console period of all time. Many of the best ports, with whether you like Samurai Showdown 3, Samurai Showdown 4, King of Fighters, 95, 96, 97. Many people's opinions outside the Neo Geo AES, arguably the Saturn is the other best version console-wise to play the ports of the KOF games. And pretty much say the same thing about all the Capcom fighters, whether it be Street Fighter II, the Alpha series, aka Zero series, or whether it be stuff like Vampire Hunter, aka Night Warriors, or Vampire Savior, aka Darkstalkers 3. Whether it be stuff like Cyberbots, Full Metal Madness, or you want to go with other stuff, the crossover series like X-Men Children of the M, Marvel Superheroes, or X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and so on. If you are a 2D fighting game fan, do yourself a favor and check out the Saturn. Also, of course, many great classics like the Panzer Dragoon series. And of course, the very coveted Panzer Dragoon Saga is many other great things. But in my opinion, the Saturn deserves much more love than it gets. Coming at number 2 is, in my opinion, a perfect example of a console that definitely deserves a lot more love than it got. Though in more recent years, I think it has started really gaining quite a big cult following through the years, and that being arguably, probably, when I think about Nintendo consoles underrated, I think of the Wii U, and this at number 2, the Nintendo GameCube, because of the quality over quantity approach with the GameCube. The GameCube has so many great games. If you want like a top-notch, good quality, like game based on a popular show or movie or something, this was a good console. Especially even though I myself do not like the cartoon series SpongeBob. If like me you're not, give the game a chance still, because SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is arguably a great solid 3D platformer game that I am genuinely surprised I actually like quite a bit. Now, otherwise, you have some great underrated fighting games as well. I mean, great games like Bloody Roar, Primal Fury, as well as many others. But also, I think where this console excels is platformers, and believe it or not, some great RPGs, and also some great survival horror games. When it comes to the survival horror route, the original exclusive console for Resident Evil Zero, as well as can't forget about games like Geist or games like, of course, Eternal Darkness, Or rather, you want to go into more platformer type side of things, you had the Tasmanian Tiger series. You had also, of course, Super Mario Sunshine, which is still, in my opinion, the probably, in my opinion, the second best 3D Mario game of all time. In my opinion, it's Odyssey, and then just right below it is. But up until Odyssey, my favorite 3D Mario game was, for many years, Sunshine. Also, you have many other classics. When I say like great, also RPGs, I think of games like the underrated Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and of course the incredible and one of only like I think three Tell games I actually own, and that is Tales of Symphonia. In my opinion, is the best Tales game. Then probably Vesperia, but just my opinion. Coming in at number one should not be a surprise to anyone. Coming at number one, in my opinion, when I think of definition of underrated, underutilized hidden gem, I think of the PlayStation Vita. Arguably, without a shadow of a doubt, the Vita is, in my opinion, easily the most underrated handheld of all time, and pretty much in general. Of course, it's about the only underrated PlayStation, surprisingly. Though, sad in more recent years, people seem to forget about the PSP, though it was extremely successful when it came out. The Vita, not so much, but I can speak as a Vita lover. Vita has one of the most hardcore fan bases of any failed console. I would say, much like the Wii U fan base is also pretty hardcore. And as in more recent time, I've become a big fan of Wii U. So it is nice to see so much love and all the love that the indie realm showed, and I appreciate the fact that Limited Run Games released multiple games for the Vita. In fact, Limited Run makes up quite a good amount of the physical releases for the Vita. Great storefront. I mean, if you get a Vita, I recommend getting many. Great if you can, for a reasonable price, get a halfway decent memory card. I would say at least get like a 16 gig, though it is proprietary, so it is going to be more expensive, keep in mind. But still great. I mean, this was the original home for games like Gravity Rush, even some great ports like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, or you want to go stuff like Injustice or Mortal Kombat 2012, as well as many others. If you want more, the like for instance, an example, in my opinion, probably the best limited run game on the handheld is arguably from Francis Pope, Papers, Please. And of course, also created another incredibly amazing game, and that being Return of the Obra Dinn from Lucas Pope. But with that said, that is, in my opinion, 10 underrated handhelds and consoles of all time. But keep in mind that it's just my own personal opinion, and yeah, I know some people say some things about so many Sega things on this list. Well, that's because, in my opinion, in general, as a brand, Sega is underrated. It deserves a lot more of the love when it gets. When most people think of Sega, they only think of the Genesis, which is arguably their most successful and their only really hugely successful console globally, which is unfortunate. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Hopefully, you enjoyed the relaxing music in the background. I'll see you soon enough for video game news coming tomorrow on Monday. And yeah, if you're wondering about the shirt, yeah, this is the AEW CM Punk shirt. But anyways, I'll see y'all next time. Stay safe. And try to stay sane and try to stay safe in all the madness going on right now in the world.